You know those moments in life that feel like they're straight out of a fairy tale? That's exactly how I felt on what was supposed to be the most magical evening of my life, my engagement party. I'd spent months planning every detail, ensuring everything would be perfect. The grand ballroom was adorned with thousands of twinkling lights, casting a warm golden glow that made everyone look like they were glowing from within. Crystal champagne flutes clinked, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of white roses, my favorite flowers. I remember standing in front of my mirror that evening, smoothing down my silk dress, my hands trembling slightly with excitement. Every girl dreams of her perfect love story, right? And I thought I had found mine. The photographer was capturing every moment, every smile, every tear of joy. My mother had already gone through three tissues, and we hadn't even gotten to the main event. But you know what's funny about perfect moments? Sometimes they're just perfectly crafted illusions. Even as I greeted our guests, accepting their warm embraces and congratulations, there was this tiny voice in the back of my mind. A whisper so faint I almost convinced myself it wasn't there. Like when you know a storm is coming, but the sky is still crystal clear. I watched as our closest friends and family filled the room, their faces beaming with genuine happiness for us. The cameras were everywhere, professional photographers, friends with their phones, all ready to capture what everyone thought would be a beautiful celebration of love. If only they knew what was really about to unfold. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the universe has a twisted way of giving us exactly what we need, even if it comes wrapped in heartbreak. That night wasn't just about an engagement party gone wrong, it was about finding the strength to stand tall when your whole world turns upside down. And trust me, what happened next would test every ounce of resilience I had in me. As I stood there surrounded by all that love and joy, I couldn't help but think about how life's biggest moments often come with the most unexpected plot twists. But here's the thing about unexpected turns. They don't just break us, they can make us stronger than we ever imagined possible. And my story, well, it was just beginning to unfold. My heart swelled with pride as Marcus stepped onto that beautifully lit stage. The spotlight caught his perfectly tailored navy suit, the one I'd helped him choose just weeks before. His smile, the one that had made me fall in love with him 3 years ago, beamed across the room. I remember thinking how handsome he looked, how lucky I was. The crowd erupted in excited whispers and encouraging cheers. Our closest friends and family were there, their phones raised high, capturing what everyone thought would be our perfect moment. I felt this strange flutter in my stomach watching him adjust his tie, a nervous tick I'd grown to love. But something felt different about it this time. There was an unfamiliar tension in his shoulders, a slight tremor in his hands that I'd never seen before. You know that feeling when something's not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it? That's exactly what was creeping up my spine as I stood there, trying to push down this growing unease. The string quartet we'd hired started playing our song, at least what everyone thought was our song. I noticed Marcus's eyes weren't meeting mine. Instead, they kept darting to the left side of the room. At the time, I convinced myself it was just nerves. After all, public speaking wasn't his strong suit. The champagne glasses clinked, camera flashes sparkled like stars, and our parents watched with tears of joy in their eyes. But deep inside, beneath my proud smile and racing heart, something was screaming at me. It was like watching a movie where you know the twist is coming, but you're powerless to stop it. My hands were shaking as I clutched my champagne glass, watching him take those final steps toward the center of the stage. Everyone else saw a man about to make the grandest gesture of love, but I saw something entirely different. I saw the end of everything I thought we'd built together, wrapped in the prettiest package of deception. My heart was racing as I watched him walk to the center of the stage, his steps deliberate and confident. The same walk I'd fallen in love with years ago. But something felt different now. The air grew thick with anticipation, and I could feel my fingers trembling as they gripped my champagne glass. The crowd's excited whispers faded into a distant hum as my entire world narrowed to this single moment. Then came the movement that changed everything. His body turned, but not toward me. No, he was facing the opposite direction toward the corner where James, his best friend, stood. My stomach lurched as understanding crashed over me like an icy wave. The signs I'd been ignoring, the late night calls, the mysterious business trips, they all suddenly made terrible sense. I watched, frozen in place, as he lowered himself onto one knee. Time seemed to stretch like taffy, each second an eternity of agony. The gasps around me came in slow motion, faces transforming from joy to confusion to horror. But I didn't look at them. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding before me, like watching a car crash in super slow motion. The words that followed, those precious words I dreamed would be meant for me, floated across the room to another's ears. James, will you marry me? The phrase hung in the air like poison, each syllable another dagger in my heart. But I didn't crumble, I didn't run. Instead, I felt a strange sense of power surge through me. You see, what nobody in that room knew was that I'd discovered their affair weeks ago. The pain had already carved its hollow space inside me, but I'd chosen to wait to let them write their own ending. As cameras flashed around us, capturing every excruciating detail, I maintained my composure. Because sometimes the most powerful response isn't in breaking down, it's in standing tall while others fall apart. In that moment, as my world publicly shattered, I made a choice. This wouldn't be a story of victimhood, but one of transformation. Every flash of those cameras was documenting not just their betrayal, but my strength, and trust me, this was just the beginning of how I would turn this nightmare into my greatest triumph. You know that feeling when your entire world shifts on its axis, but somehow you remain standing? That's where I found myself, watching the cameras flash like stars in a universe that had suddenly lost all meaning. My chest felt hollow, yet somehow impossibly heavy at the same time. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never with him on one knee before someone else. I remember catching my reflection in one of the champagne glasses on a nearby table. My face was a mask of composure that betrayed none of the hurricane raging inside me. Years ago, my grandmother had told me something that echoed in my mind at that moment. Sometimes your greatest strength comes from staying silent when you have every right to scream. I understood those words more deeply than ever before. The murmurs around me grew into a crescendo of gasps and whispers, but I remained still, my phone steady in my hand, recording every second. Each flash of the cameras felt like a validation of my decision to let this moment play out. You see, when you discover a truth so devastating, it either breaks you or transforms you. I had chosen transformation. My mind drifted to all the late night conversations, the shared dreams, the promises we'd made. Each memory now felt like a carefully crafted lie, a performance worthy of Broadway. But here's the thing about performances, they're meant to be seen, to be witnessed. And as I stood there watching this theatrical betrayal unfold, I realized I wasn't just an audience member anymore. I was becoming the director of my own story. That the weight of my phone in my hand felt different now. Not just a device, but a weapon of truth. Every second I captured was a brick in the foundation of my redemption. I could feel my heart beating in sync with each camera click, each gasp, each moment of this unfolding drama. This wasn't just about exposure anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative. In that frozen moment, surrounded by the chaos of disbelief and shock, I made a choice. A choice that would ripple through social media, through our social circles, through the very fabric of both our lives. Because sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't tears or rage, it's calculated, composed documentation of the truth. What they didn't realize was that my silence wasn't weakness. It was the calm before a storm of my own making. And as I stood there steady and resolute, I knew that this moment wouldn't define me as a victim. Instead, it would mark the beginning of my emergence as something far more powerful, a woman who refused to let someone else write her story's ending. In that moment, as cameras flashed and gasps filled the air, something extraordinary happened within me. My initial shock crystallized into a clarity I'd never experienced before. I felt my heart beating steadily, no longer racing with anxiety, but pulsing with purpose. You see, while everyone else was frozen in disbelief, I was transforming. Like a masterful chess player, I could suddenly see all the moves laid out before me. The weight of my phone in my hand became significant. Those cameras weren't just capturing my humiliation, they were documenting his truth, our truth.
And in that moment, I realized I had the power to shape how this story would be told.
The universe had handed me not just a burden, but an opportunity to turn this private betrayal into a powerful message of resilience. My hand stopped shaking as I lifted my phone higher, ensuring every second was captured. I remember thinking about all the other people who had ever been betrayed, who had their trust shattered in front of others. In my mind, I wasn't just recording this for myself anymore. I was recording it for every person who had ever been told to stay quiet, to be ashamed, to hide their pain. The energy surging through me wasn't anger anymore. It was determination. Pure, unshakable determination. I felt like a phoenix, watching my old life burn away, but knowing something stronger would emerge from the ashes. Every click of those cameras, every shocked whisper, every second of this spectacle was becoming ammunition in my arsenal of truth. I knew then that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something much more significant. As I stood there watching my former fiancé on one knee before another man, I made a silent vow to myself. This moment wouldn't define me as a victim, it would launch me as a voice for authenticity and courage. The plan forming in my mind was crystal clear. Social media wouldn't just be a platform for sharing cute photos anymore, it would become my stage for revealing the raw, unfiltered truth. I would turn this private humiliation into a public conversation about honesty, about living your truth, about rising above betrayal with dignity intact. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my narrative and helping others find their strength in their darkest moments. Sometimes the universe hands you a microphone when you least expect it, and I was ready to use mine. The silence in that room was deafening, punctuated only by shocked gasps and hurried whispers.
I watched as my aunt covered her mouth in horror, her eyes darting between me and the scene unfolding on stage. My best friend Sarah reached for my hand, but I kept my composure, letting the weight of everyone's confusion hang in the air. Their reactions were exactly what I had anticipated, a perfect mixture of disbelief and secondhand embarrassment that would make what came next even more impactful. I could feel the tension building as people started connecting the dots. My mother's friends, who had helped plan this entire engagement party, were frantically whispering among themselves. The photographer, bless his heart, hadn't stopped clicking, each flash preserving this moment of betrayal for posterity. That's exactly what I wanted. Every single frame would tell our story, but not the story they thought they were capturing. In those moments, as chaos erupted around me, my mind was crystal clear. I had rehearsed this scenario countless times in my head since discovering the truth weeks ago. The pain of betrayal had transformed into something else entirely, a force that would ensure this night would be remembered, but on my terms. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady with purpose. I watched as my former fiancé's family tried to process what was happening. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and recognition. Some of them must have known, must have been part of this elaborate deception. But they had no idea that I had been orchestrating my own revelation, carefully planning each detail of this moment. The murmurs grew louder, people starting to turn to me, expecting tears, expecting a breakdown. But what they saw instead was something that confused them even more. A slight smile playing on my lips. Because while they thought they were witnessing my humiliation, I knew this was just the beginning of my story. The cameras were still rolling, catching every reaction, every whisper, every shocked face.
And in just a few moments, I would transform this attempted humiliation into something entirely different. Something that would make sure the truth wasn't just heard, but remembered that, looking around that room, I saw the perfect stage for what was about to unfold. Every person present would become part of a story that would echo far beyond these walls. The truth was about to go viral, and I was ready to press play on my own version of events that, with trembling hands, I gripped the microphone, feeling its weight like destiny itself. The room had fallen into a thick, suffocating silence, broken only by scattered whispers and the soft clicking of cameras that wouldn't stop recording. I could feel hundreds of eyes burning into me, questioning, pitying, wondering what I would do next. But they had no idea that this moment, this exact moment, was what I had been preparing for. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I refused to let my voice shake. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, screenshots, and testimonies. I had traced every lie, every secret meeting, every betrayal back to its source. The truth had been my constant companion, my shield, and now it would become my sword. I remember looking directly at them, my ex-fiancé and his new love, still frozen in their picture-perfect proposal pose. The audacity of their deception fueled something powerful inside me. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about reclaiming my story, about showing every person who had ever been betrayed that they don't have to shrink into silence. Since the cameras are already rolling, I began, my voice carrying across the stunned audience. Let's give them something worth watching. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the venue's display system, just as I had arranged with the tech team hours before. My hands weren't trembling anymore.
Each movement was deliberate, each breath calculated. The giant screen behind me flickered to life, and I watched as understanding began to dawn on their faces. Text messages, photos, bank statements, the evidence of their months-long affair and financial manipulation started to unfold before everyone's eyes. But this wasn't just an exposé, this was my declaration of independence. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces and felt something shift inside me. The vulnerability that had threatened to consume me transformed into an unstoppable force. This was my moment of metamorphosis, where pain became power and silence turned into strength. And I knew with absolute certainty that by choosing to stand up and speak my truth, I was not just changing my own story, I was giving permission to countless others to do the same. I stood there, microphone in hand, my heart pounding against my chest as I watched their shocked faces staring back at me. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft whirring of cameras still recording. This was my moment and I knew exactly what I needed to say. You're all wondering why I'm smiling right now. I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. You see, this theatrical display of love wasn't a surprise to me. I've known about their relationship for months. Every late-night meeting, every secret phone call, every hidden message, I documented it all. I could feel the energy in the room shift as I pulled out my phone. The confused whispers turned to gasps as I projected screenshots onto the wall behind me. 3 months ago, I discovered their affair, but instead of confronting them immediately, I made a choice. I chose to let them write their own story, fully knowing that tonight would be their grand finale. The look on my ex-fiance's face transformed from shock to horror as I continued. You wanted a show? Well, I gave you an audience. You wanted cameras? I made sure they kept rolling.
You wanted to go viral. Trust me. You will, just not the way you planned. I watched as my words sank in. Some guests covered their mouths in disbelief. Others shook their heads in disgust at the betrayal. But in their eyes, I saw something else emerging: respect. Respect for the woman who refused to be a victim in someone else's love story. This isn't just about revenge, I declared, my voice growing stronger with each word. This is about reclaiming my narrative, about showing everyone here that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't tears or anger, it's strategic silence followed by calculated truth. The room erupted in applause, but I wasn't finished. My voice carried over the noise, charged with emotion, but unwavering in its resolve. To anyone who's ever been betrayed, who's ever felt powerless in the face of deception, your story isn't over. Sometimes the most devastating moments in our lives become our greatest source of strength. Tonight, I chose to transform my pain into power, and I invite you all to witness what happens next. The seconds after I finished speaking felt like an eternity. The grand ballroom, once filled with celebratory chatter, fell into a deafening silence. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears as I watched the truth sink in across the sea of faces before me. My revelation hung heavy in the air, and I stood there, both trembling and somehow stronger than I'd ever been. The first reaction came from my mother. I saw her hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and heartbreak, not for the scandal, but for the pain I'd endured in silence. Then, like a wave building momentum, the murmurs began. They started as whispers, grew into gasps, and finally erupted into a chaos of voices and movement. Some guests rushed toward me, while others turned their backs, unable to process what they just witnessed. My best friend Sarah was the first to reach me, wrapping her arms around me in a fierce embrace that spoke volumes. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Through my peripheral vision, I could see my ex-fiancé and his secret lover trying to make a hasty exit, but the crowd had become an impenetrable wall of judgment and disbelief. The cameras, those same cameras that had been capturing what was supposed to be our perfect engagement party, were still rolling, documenting every moment of this unfolding drama. But this time, they were capturing my truth, my strength, my refusal to be a silent victim in someone else's love story. My father, always the quiet one, surprised me that night. He stepped forward, took my hand, and announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This is my daughter. She deserves better, and I'm proud she chose truth over pretense." His words cut through the chaos, and I felt a surge of validation wash over me. The night that was meant to celebrate a lie became a testament to authenticity. As I stood there, watching my carefully planned future crumble around me, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Yes, there was pain, but there was also liberation. The weight of secrecy had been lifted, and in its place, I found my voice stronger and more resolute than ever before. Sometimes the most powerful moments of our lives aren't the ones we plan, but the ones where we finally choose ourselves, where we stand in our truth, regardless of the consequences. That night, I didn't just expose a betrayal. I reclaimed my story, my dignity, and my future. The drive home that night was surreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel, as the city lights blurred past me, each flash reminding me of the cameras that had captured everything. I remember letting out a laugh, not one of joy, but of pure liberation. The weight I'd carried for months had finally been lifted, even if it meant watching my world crumble in front of everyone I knew. Dot, you know that moment when truth hits you so hard it almost feels physical. That's what I felt as I walked into my empty apartment. The silence was deafening, but for the first time in months, it wasn't filled with the echoes of lies and pretense. I kicked off my heels, still covered in confetti from what should have been my engagement party, and sank into my couch, letting the emotions wash over me like waves. The pain was there, raw and real, but something else was rising through the cracks of my broken heart power. I had taken control of my narrative. While everyone else saw a victim of betrayal, I knew I was the author of my own redemption story. My phone kept buzzing with notifications, each one a reminder that the truth was spreading exactly as I had planned. I spent hours that night just sitting there, watching as my story unfolded across social media. Messages poured in, some expressing shock, others sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. In those moments of vulnerability, I found strength in knowing that my pain could become someone else's warning sign, someone else's courage to speak up. Let me tell you something I learned that night. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let the truth speak for itself. You don't need to scream it from rooftops or craft elaborate revenge plots. Sometimes you just need to step back and let reality do its work. The tears came, of course they did, but they weren't tears of loss anymore. They were tears of release, of freedom. Every drop that fell was washing away the person I'd pretended to be, revealing the stronger woman I'd become through this ordeal. For anyone out there hiding behind a facade of perfection, carrying the weight of someone else's lies, I want you to know that your truth, however messy or painful, is worth telling. Your story, your hurt, your healing, it all matters. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stand in our truth and let the cameras keep rolling. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm of digital chaos and emotional aftershocks. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications as the video spread like wildfire across social media. I watched the comments sections fill up with a mix of support and judgment, each ping on my phone a reminder of how public my private pain had become. I remember sitting in my living room, surrounded by the gifts we'd received at the party, each one now feeling like a cruel joke. The beautiful engagement photo frame my aunt had given us sat face down on the coffee table. I couldn't bear to look at it, yet I couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. Every object held a story of what could have been, what should have been. The messages started pouring in from friends and family. Some were shocked, others angry on my behalf. How could he do this to you? They asked. But what hit me hardest were the messages from strangers who'd seen the video. People who shared their own stories of betrayal, of moments when they too had to choose between staying silent and standing up for themselves. I found myself crying at random moments throughout the day, not just from sadness, but from a complex mixture of relief, anger, and, oddly enough, pride. Because I hadn't crumbled when my world fell apart. Instead, I turned my pain into power, my heartbreak into headlines. Social media became both my battlefield and my sanctuary. For every cruel comment suggesting I should have known, there were 10 more celebrating my courage. The hashtag #LetTheCameras_roll started trending, becoming a symbol for refusing to be a victim of someone else's story. You know what's strange about trauma? It teaches you things about yourself you never knew. In those days of aftermath, I discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed. Every time I read a message from someone saying I helped them find the courage to face their own truth, I felt my wounds slowly transforming into wisdom. To anyone watching who's facing their own moment of truth, remember this: sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let the cameras keep rolling. Let the world see the real story, your story. Because in the end, it's not about the spectacle of exposure, it's about reclaiming your narrative and turning your pain into a legacy of authenticity and courage. In the days that followed, something extraordinary happened amidst my pain. My phone began lighting up with messages that weren't just about the viral video or the scandal. They were beacons of light in what felt like endless darkness. I remember sitting on my bedroom floor, tears streaming down my face, as I read message after message from people who saw beyond the spectacle and recognized the human heart breaking beneath it all. My best friend Sarah showed up at my door with my favorite comfort food and a shoulder to cry on. She didn't try to fix anything or offer empty platitudes. Instead, she sat with me in silence, letting me feel everything I needed to feel. That's when I realized that sometimes the strongest support comes without words. What touched me most deeply were the unexpected allies. Former colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with their own stories of betrayal and resurrection. A woman from my yoga class, whom I'd barely exchanged hellos with, sent me a heartfelt letter about how her grandmother faced a similar situation in the 1960s and emerged stronger than ever. These connections reminded me that pain, while deeply personal, is also universally human. The most profound message came from my high school drama teacher. She wrote, "You turned a moment meant to shame you into a spotlight for truth." That's not just brave, that's revolutionary. Her words helped me see that by letting those cameras roll, I hadn't just exposed a betrayal, I'd given voice to everyone who'd ever been silenced by shame. Through these connections, I began to understand that resilience isn't about standing alone. It's about allowing yourself to be held up by the web of humanity around you. Every message, every call, every unexpected act of kindness became a thread in a new tapestry of support. I never knew I needed. To anyone watching this who feels alone in their darkest moment. Look around, support often comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the people you barely know become the ones who help you rewrite your story. Your pain may feel isolating, but I promise you there are people waiting to help you carry it. Let them in. Let their light guide you toward your own revolution of truth. In the depths of my darkest moments, I discovered a truth that would become my salvation. Healing isn't just about moving on, it's about moving inward. After that night, when the cameras captured more than just an engagement party, I made a conscious decision to turn my pain into power. Every morning, I would sit with my journal, pouring out the raw emotions that threatened to consume me. Those tear-stained pages became my first steps toward reclaiming my identity. I remember the day I walked into my first therapy session, my hands trembling but my spirit determined. My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't broken. I was breaking free. Through our sessions, I began to unravel years of self-doubt that had led me to accept less than I deserved. Each revelation was like removing a heavy stone from my chest, allowing me to breathe deeper, stand taller. The most transformative part of my journey wasn't just the professional help, it was the profound connection I developed with myself. I started practicing mindfulness, not to escape the pain, but to embrace it as a teacher.
Every evening, I would light a candle and write down one thing I was proud of about myself, one truth that didn't depend on anyone else's validation.
This journey taught me that self worth isn't something that can be taken away by someone else's betrayal. It's an unshakable foundation that we build, brick by brick, through self discovery and radical self acceptance. I learned to love my reflection, not for how others saw me, but for the resilient soul staring back at me. The viral video that captured my humiliation became a catalyst for my transformation. Comments from strangers who shared their own stories of resilience reminded me that our darkest moments often lead to our greatest evolution. I started volunteering at support groups, sharing my story not as a victim, but as someone who chose to rise. Today, comma, I stand before you not as someone who was betrayed, but as someone who chose to believe in the power of their own light. My story isn't just about survival, it's about the extraordinary strength we find when we choose to heal ourselves first. Remember, your worth isn't measured by the actions of others, but by the courage you show in choosing yourself. Again and again, through this journey, I've learned that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the endings we never wanted. And that's the most powerful truth I can share with you. We are all capable of turning our pain into purpose, our scars into stars that guide others home. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become the catalysts for our greatest transformations. As I stand here today, looking back at that engagement party that changed everything, I don't see a victim anymore. I see a warrior who chose to write her own ending to a story that was meant to break her. You know, there's something incredibly powerful about choosing how your story unfolds, even when others try to write it for you. That night, when I let those cameras keep rolling, I wasn't just documenting a betrayal, I was reclaiming my narrative. Every click of those cameras became a testament to my refusal to hide in shame for someone else's actions. The journey hasn't been easy. There were nights when the weight of what happened felt like it would crush me. But with each passing day, I discovered strength I never knew I had. I learned that resilience isn't about pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's about acknowledging it, growing through it, and using it to forge something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. What my ex-fiancé and his new partner never realized was that their actions didn't diminish me, they awakened me. They thought they were ending my story, but they were actually opening the first chapter of my rebirth. The viral truth wasn't just about exposure, it was about standing in my power and showing others that we don't have to be silent when life throws its worst at us. To everyone who's ever felt betrayed, humiliated, or broken, I want you to know that your story doesn't end at the painful chapter. You have the power to turn your wounds into wisdom, your tears into triumph. I've learned that true strength isn't in never falling. It's in rising every single time life knocks you down, and rising with grace. Today, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. My story has connected me with countless others who faced their own battles, and together we're creating a movement of resilience and authenticity. This experience taught me that sometimes life's greatest plot twists lead us exactly where we need to be. So let this be a reminder: your story matters, your strength matters, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand in your truth. Let the cameras roll and show the world that you won't be defined by someone else's betrayal. Because in the end, it's not about the way they hurt you, it's about the way you heal, grow, and inspire others along the way. This isn't just my story anymore, it's a testament to the power of choosing yourself, of turning pain into purpose. So I challenge you, take your own difficult moments and transform them into stepping stones towards something greater. Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin right after the ones that try to break us.